because these patients do not have all four limbs. So they have a very limited cardiac capacity due to lack of activity. So she was very much clear and motivated that she needs to have both normal hands. And she was our first patient who underwent transplant for a birth defect.
Perhaps nothing is so fraught with significance as the human hand.
Look for the silver lining whenever a cloud appears in the blue.
Liver transplant, lung transplant, heart transplant, kidney transplant. Add to that, hand transplant, an emerging popular field which is transforming the way people are living their lives, the way people are harnessing their full potential. Welcome to Between Us, make every conversation count. And today in conversation with me is Dr. Nilesh Satbhai, head of the hand transplant surgery department in Global Hospital, Parel, Mumbai. Welcome to the show, Doc.
Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you.
Let's begin by understanding what exactly is a hand transplant.
Hand transplant is a complex process in which a hand from one donor is transplanted into a suitable recipient. So transplant per se means that we are transferring organs from one person to another,
Yes.
and they may or may not be related. So hand amputees typically are living a dependent life, so they are in need of hands. So somebody who is a brain dead donor, once he donates his hands, these hands are attached to a suitable recipient. All the structures are attached, and then we expect the hands to recover and function over a period of time. So this in broad is a hand transplant.
So a suitable hand, right? So I don't think the process is as simple that there is somebody who's a brain dead person and they have hands and somebody needs one. But I'm sure there are some checks which you have to go through, right? In terms of how do they match? Are there any specific prerequisites you have to look into before the transplant is okayed?
Yes, so the transplant process is quite lengthy and complex. We have checks at multiple levels. We need to identify a suitable recipient. Now, most important thing or the difference between a hand transplant and any other transplant is that hand transplant is not a life-saving transplant. So this is not essential for every amputee. So that itself is an important factor which is crucial in determining who is the right candidate to undergo a hand transplant.
It is not essential, but it will definitely make a huge difference, right?
Yes.
In terms of the way you are living a life.
Definitely. From that perspective, hand transplant is revolutionary. It is life-changing. But from just broadly, if you consider of life-saving conditions and when it is a question of life and death, then hand transplant is not a life-saving surgery.
Correct.
So a lot of moral, ethical and other dilemmas come in because as we know, after any transplant, a patient is on lifelong immunosuppression.
Correct.
So we need to do a detailed preoperative checkup and a workup, an assessment of the recipient at in terms of his physical, social, economical, psychological condition, and then determine if he is the right candidate to undergo this kind of procedure.
So when you talk about the right candidate, one is, of course, his mental ability to be able to absorb and take all those medicines and live on lifelong medicines, right? That's one part of it. Apart from that, what is the criteria when you decide that this is the person who's going to get these hands? I mean, are there any other criteria?
Yes, the basic workup, because every person or every individual on this earth is different from each other.
Right.
Except two twins who look similar to each other. Every individual is different.
But that odds are very, very, very less, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So we have to do a very perfect genetic mapping or matching of the donor and the recipient.
Okay.
In order to ensure that there is least possible mismatch between the two.
Okay.
Because when organ or a tissue which is different from my own genetic makeup comes into my body is going to perceive it as a threat. So it is going to launch an attack on it because in order to protect myself.
Yeah, in fact, it might be counterproductive.
Yes. So that is the reason why the immunosuppressive medications are needed. What these medications do is that they are suppressing my immunity. It is suppressing my ability to launch this attack. So when we do the cross match between the donor and the recipient, we try to check of how much is the mismatch between the two. What is the possibility that the recipient will react severely against the donor? What is the possibility that he might reject the organ?
Okay.
So that testing is done preoperatively in order to get an idea of the recipient status. And then whenever the donor is available, we do a cross match between the donor and the recipient to see the reaction between the two. So those are all tests which determine the safety to go ahead or the possibility of having a rejection in the future.
Yeah, those tests are done. That's the first step.
Yes.
So
yes.
just like any other transplant, there must be a bank, right, where you probably are intimated that there is something which has come up which probably could help this patient, right?
Yes.
There must be some kind of
So there is a streamlined system which is regulated by the government. All the potential recipients, they are registered with the government. They are on a wait list. And whenever a suitable donor is available, it is informed again to the government, and the government allocates the different organs to the different patients as per the waiting list. And then we check the compatibility between the donor and the recipient before we finally go ahead with the transplant.
So typically, how long is this wait list?
Yes, for hands, the waiting list, in terms of number of recipients, it is quite less because, as I said, not every individual is a candidate for transplant.
Right.
So we try to select the right patient so that he has to handle it throughout his lifetime. So the number of patients on the waiting list are not much. But the getting a donation or getting a hand donation itself is quite challenging.
Right.
Because of the awareness in the society. Today, everybody is aware of eye donation, skin donation, liver or kidney transplants are known to almost every common man. But hand transplant is still an unknown entity for most, even the medical doctors and even within the hospitals itself. So
in terms of awareness.
In terms of awareness.
Right.
So getting an hand donation is an extremely challenging thing. So in our initial cases, in spite of talking repeatedly about awareness, about transplants, we still took close to 2.5 years to get a hand.
The lack of availability, or is it more to do with the other tests you go about doing, compatibility and all of that? Or is it a combination of everything, the wait list and then the tests and everything?
Yes, it is both actually. The lack of awareness in the society that hand transplant or hand donation is essential or hand transplant is possible. And second also is a lot of myths or misbeliefs or restrictions in terms of hands being external organs. When the hands are taken, it is causing a visible mutilation to the body. So that again acts like an hindrance because many a times the donor families, they are willing to donate everything from inside without causing any external mutilation to the body.
Right.
But cutting off your hand and giving it has an external impact.
Oh, absolutely.
That adds to the difficulty in getting a hand donation.
You also spoke about the process. One is obviously the waitlist part of it. And let's assume that there is a recipient and there is a donor. Then you said you have to do the genetic mapping, the testing and all of that. On an average, how much time does it take for that to happen?
Cross-match between the donor and the recipient takes 4 to 6 hours.
Okay.
The time that we need once we receive an alert. So once we receive an alert, typically we get the blood of the donor. We get the blood of the recipient. We perform the cross-match test, which takes 4 to 6 hours to get us the result.
Yeah.
All the other tests which are needed are done beforehand, before the patient gets listed.
Okay. What kind of tests are we talking about?
So these tests are including assessment of all the systems in the body because immunosuppressive medications will have an impact on the entire body.
Right.
So we need to assess the cardiac function, we need to assess the lung function, the liver, kidney function as a baseline in order to ensure that this is our function today and these are the parameters. If we find any problem in those parameters, we try to correct them, or we are more cautious about
Right.
what could go wrong in the future. So all that detailed workup happens pre-operatively. In addition to that, we do a CT scan, an MRI, or an angiography to do the technical planning of the
Right.
transplant.
Right.
So all these planning happens beforehand, before the patient gets registered. Once we are on the waiting list, we are ready to receive the call at any point of time. But after that, we need time for the cross match. And then till that time, the patient or the donor has to be maintained, because he is probably donating a lot of other organs as well. So it needs a lot of multidisciplinary coordination. Somebody is taking the heart, somebody is taking the lungs, somebody is taking the liver, the kidney, and then the hands as well. So a lot of different teams are involved on the day of retrieval, and that coordination and logistics it becomes quite complex.
And how often is it that, if I may ask this, where the recipient and the donor are from the same city? What are how often does it happen?
It would be ideal if they are from the same city. Ideally, they should be.
But does it happen?
Unfortunately, the awareness is still lacking very severely, at least in the city of Mumbai or in the state of Maharashtra. Till date, out of the 9 transplants that we have done, we did not get a single donor from Mumbai or Maharashtra.
What are the cities where, other cities where you...
So our first patient received hands from a male donor from Chennai. The other patients, barring one, has received from a lady from Indore. All the remaining 7 donors have been from Surat and Ahmedabad.
Okay, that's interesting. So you're saying the awareness is more outside of a metro city like Mumbai, which is like, I would expect Mumbai to be probably a little more aware, not to say that other cities aren't, but being a metro city with all the amenities and facilities available. Let's talk about the awareness part, because you mentioned that there is a certain amount of awareness which is lacking from a donor perspective. I'm going to ask you from both the sides, the donors and the recipient. So let's begin with the donor side. Obviously, I understood that people would be happy to donate other parts of the body, but the hand, when it comes to that, so that's basically a challenge. What do you think can be done to increase the awareness or improve so that people who really want to people who really want to transform their lives, they could get that kind of support?
So the donor awareness for hand transplants is still in its beginning, or it's at an early stage. Just like any other field, there's a learning curve, right? So today liver and kidney are established, but they also had their tough times earlier. Similarly, as the time goes, the awareness about hand transplants also is bound to increase. But the best part of hand transplant awareness is that you have results to see. So you have people who have transformed their lives, who have been totally dependent to begin with, and now they are doing all the things on their own, or they are doing wonderful activities like any other normal individual. So that itself is a big boost.
True.
Or a big piece of information for the society to understand what difference hand transplants can make. So the awareness, I'm sure, is going to increase over the time. The simplest thing that we can think in terms of the donor perspective is knowing about the procedure beforehand. Because when somebody is brain dead, that is not the time when you hear about these things for the first time.
Right.
So it should be floating around in the society, in the media, in the literature, such that people are aware about it beforehand.
True.
They pledge their organs beforehand. They inform their family of their decisions. And then it makes easier for the family to go ahead and donate the organs. And the most important step to begin with is to begin the awareness early. Just as today we hear that even school children are being exposed to these concepts, and the awareness should begin at that level. That is how, when they grow up, they'll become responsible individuals, and then an entire generation would be educated and aware about organ donation or organ transplants.
So that's interesting because we are talking about awareness from a perspective of how it has transformed the lives of recipients. And if we go about, sharing those stories, through, in today's world, social media out there, and maybe give a glimpse of how they are living their normal life. And I'm sure you will have a lot of interesting stories from your patients. What are you seeing? The kind of transformations you have seen with your patients?
So all these patients, they have a very special story to tell,
Hmm.
and
I'm
and,
sure.
and it really connects emotionally with you.
Hmm.
Our first patient, who is pretty well known to the city of Mumbai,
Hmm.
was a young girl who lost both her hands in a freak train accident at Ghatkopar station,
Hmm.
and she fell into the gap between the platform and the train, and that actually led to a revolution of sorts,
Hmm.
which ultimately led to increasing or elevating the platform levels till the doorstep of the trains.
Yeah.
So that was a major event in 2014,
Hmm.
and the same girl, Monica, who underwent transplant and became the first recipient of Western India in August 2020.
Hmm.
So today she is living a totally independent and different life, and she's serving as an inspiration and example for many.
And I believe she's working in your hospital, right?
Yes, so she's working as a patient care coordinator,
Okay.
and she's interacting with patients, and she's an inspiration for patients to fight and come out of difficult problems.
That's a beautiful story, Doc. That's really
Yes.
a beautiful story. So this incident happened in 2014 and the transplant happened in 2020. So that means a 6 years wait. And you said this is the first transplant from Western India. When did the first transplant happen in India? When was the first hand transplant procedure done in India?
Yes. The first transplant in India happened in 2015,
Mhm.
in January 2015, at Amruta Hospital in Kochi.
Okay.
Again, this was a bilateral transplant done for a young boy who had again lost. So all these patients have a story. So this young boy was trying to defend a lady who was harassed by some goons in a train,
Uh-huh.
and he was pushed by them, and he fell on the tracks and lost both his hands.
Hands. Oh.
And then he was rehabilitated after the transplant, and he's today and back to his normal life. He's married, he's having kids.
That's such a beautiful story, Doc. So when did the incident actually happen? Do you have an idea as to when this?
I guess it was a couple of years before his transplant.
Okay.
So he was living as an amputee for a couple of years before.
Okay. That's interesting. So 2015 is when actually the first transplant happened. And was the one in Mumbai the second one? Or there were a few in between?
No, there were a few in between. So Amrita Institute has been the pioneer in India,
Okay.
and it has done close to 12 to 13 transplants till date. And we in Mumbai started our program in 2016.
Okay.
And the awareness for organ donations took quite a long time. Monica was registered for more than 2.5 years
Years
before she
before.
could get her hands. But the good thing is that her successful story inspired a lot of other individuals to come ahead and donate hands,
Absolutely.
and that our future patients could get hands earlier. So the average wait time for the future patients has been close to 3 to 6 months.
Absolutely.
And till date, 9 individuals have undergone bilateral hand transplants at global hospitals in Mumbai.
That's fascinating, Doc. So I have a whole lot of questions around this. But first things first is one thing is, of course, the awareness, because these stories will help push people to really transform their life, right? And as you said, it may not be absolutely critical. So there are people who probably don't have hands and they're still living a normal life, at least from their perspective. For those who are actually undergoing this process of transformation, the patients itself, and I know that you said that apart from all of the other checks which you do, how do you build them up? Because there is a conversation which you must be having with the patients when this process starts. Talk us through that process.
So it's not a very scientific process.
Hmm.
It is actually using my senses or my acumen
That's what we want to hear. Yeah.
to judge who I feel could be the right candidate. It involves a lot of soft signs to pick up, the attitude of the individual, his way to respond to the problem, the way he has handled the problems till date, his vision for what he has to do in his life, the way his perspective of looking at problems or trying to solve them or get over them. All
Do
these
you have an example which you could share without naming?
what I broadly feel is that having the right kind of attitude in life is the most important factor. Even though that there could be a difficulty, there could be multiple problems, but if you have the will to look at it in the right manner, to fight against it, and to make the most of it, in order to do good to yourself and to do good to your family, that individual would score much more than somebody else who wants to do it just because he can afford it.
How many sittings do you typically have, or how many times do you meet the patient, the family, for you to finally take that call?
So so actually even one meeting gives you a lot of information, because it really creates a strong impression in my mind, and it helps me make my call of how this person could behave or handle the transplant. But yes, we typically meet them on 2 to 3 occasions in different settings with their family members, see the interactions. Many a times, after getting the information, after understanding the complexity of the procedures, they come with a different perspective or attitude next time. So we go through all these things. We try to do some kind of background checks as well, like talking just to the family members, trying to get the perspective into that person's mind, because many a times they are depressed, they have lost hope, they are dependent, they lost their self respect, so they may not really open up to you in the first meeting. So all these factors go on to decide, because when the question is of life and death, then there's not much thinking.
I got that, doc. Yeah.
So that then you don't need to think of all these things. Life comes first.
Right.
But when this is a quality of life issue, then you need the person with a sane mind to be able to handle and tackle the potential problems of immunosuppression throughout the life.
Yeah, it's a lot to do with your dreams, your goals, your ambitions, where you want to. What is and I know that the family support, of course, is really, really helpful, very important. Do you have counselors set up with the patients who sit down and have conversations with them? Because, there is an enthusiasm, excitement, and as you said, you have multiple sittings, but I'm sure once the process is complete, they do come back for continuous counseling and to go ahead. I mean, as they continue with their life, there must be a certain process around that, right?
Yes. So we do have a psychological assessment before the surgery. We do have a psychiatric assessment as well, because we need these clearances before we go ahead with the surgery. Plus, it also helps the patient to prepare himself mentally before venturing into the entire process of a transplant. And post surgery, of course, not much psychological help is actually needed, because the surgery itself creates such a big positive change in the patient's mind, that they're extremely positive and hopeful to come out of it successfully.
I can imagine you go into a surgery without hands and you wake up to see. Of course, there are other issues to take care, but it's just an amazing feeling.
Yes.
How much time does it take for the body to accept and for things to start normalizing? I know it may not be perfect at any given point of time, but general process where people can go about their normal work.
So the cross match test, as we discussed initially, is again the decider of how easily the body would accept the transplanted hands, because the mismatch between the donor and the recipient is again comes into play. The initial success of a transplant is to restore the blood circulation of the limb
Sure.
so that the limb survives. That is the initial success. Naturally, after the limb is attached to the body is going to react against it. Whatever you do, however favorable the cross match may be, the body will still perceive it as foreign. So the body is going to launch an immune response.
Right.
But we try to control or ensure that this response is not very severe, that the hands are rejected. So the medications are titrated accordingly such that the rejection does not happen. But yes, in the initial few months or within the first year, it is known that some kind of minor rejections can happen, which can be tackled with adjustments in medications. And after 1 year, it is usually less severe and less frequent. And regarding the recovery of the hands, depending on the level at which the hands are attached, the nerve recovery happens. So
Okay.
the nerve recovery is a slow process. It happens at say 1 millimeter per day. So it's a lengthy process. And say below elbow, the hands recover in 6 to 9 months. Above elbow, they recover in 1 to 1.5 year. We have done transplants even at the level of the shoulder, in which the recovery could be 1.5 to 2 years. So
Okay.
the distance of the nerve repair site till the fingers determines the duration of recovery.
But during this process, they continue with their normal work, right? I mean, whatever they're doing. That goes on,
Yes.
and they slowly and steadily start using their hands.
Yes, so it is not that the hands are non-functional
Yeah,
till
that's
then.
what I wanted to know. Yeah.
Yeah, so they are gaining some function day by day. Like the elbows would start moving first, the forearms would move, the wrist would move, the fingers would move. So as the nerve recovers, the muscles on its way will gain power, and you can still make use of the hands for some or the other activities.
Okay.
So it's a process, and they keep learning to do newer things day by day. And the intricacy of the movement or the finer things or the finer tasks they are able to do at the end of complete recovery.
That's fascinating. So we are talking about the different levels, and you also spoke about Monica, who's working in your hospital. Are there some other interesting stories you would like to share?
Yes, as I said, all of them are actually interesting stories.
Absolutely, for you, they are all are. Yeah.
So the second patient that we had done, he is actually a quadruple amputee. I mean, he had lost both hands and both feet.
Okay.
So that was following a freak electricity, accident in a farm in Rajasthan.
Uh-huh.
He lost all 4 limbs, and he was an aspiring kabaddi player. And imagine a young boy with a sister who is married, old parents. It was a very sad situation, a very difficult time for his parents as well. He was an extremely quiet introvert guy when he met me for the first time. We met again on a couple of occasions. We decided we had to do something for him because life is ended otherwise.
What made you decide on him? Was it his willpower, he wanting to do something? How did you?
So from his brother-in-law, I came to know that he had a sportsman attitude basically. Though he was depressed and quiet, but you could trust his grit or ability to work hard or ability to train and the hopes he had from the future. And we had to give back these hopes to him.
So talk us through your initial interactions with him. And
it was actually quite difficult for him to open up initially because he had been through a lot. Some people losing their hands, but at least they have their feet and they're up and about.
I can imagine.
But you lose your feet, and even though you're using artificial or prosthetic limbs, you don't have the hands to put them on. So that is even more frustrating. So we decided that he was obviously the candidate to go ahead with, and there are certain different challenges, especially in terms of anesthesia and other metabolic changes that happen because these patients do not have all four limbs, so they have a very limited cardiac capacity due to lack of activity. But luckily, we could get through all the hurdles. The transplant went on well, and today you would not believe the way he has recovered. He's back to his farms. He's driving a car. He's driving a
Oh
tractor,
my goodness.
and he's trying to get back to his life. Though he will not be able to be a kabaddi player, but I'm sure we could do the best we can.
So one of the things is, as I was researching for our episode, I found out few articles here and there. I read some articles on LinkedIn and a couple of social media, but I somehow feel that there is still not enough being done to tell these stories. Is there? Do you feel you're not getting enough support from the government, from the establishment, or what is it? What is stopping us to listen to those stories and encourage more people to transform their lives?
I believe I'm not sure of what the exact reasons could be, but yes, I believe that this has become a life mission for me. I've been doing this for the last several years, and I'm sure I'll continue to do this over the coming years as well.
I'm going to get to that. So, what according to you should be done or could be done to increase the awareness? I mean, if you could just probably list out a few points. What do you think we can do?
So these stories should reach out to as many people as possible.
Right.
People should be aware to begin with that these things are possible. And these are the avenues which are available right in our own country. And transplant can be done safely, successfully, because they are the only solution for these amputees. We know that the artificial limbs of the prostheses provide very limited function. They cannot really replace normal natural hands. So these stories should reach the maximum people. People should be aware that hand donation is possible. It is required, though it is not a life-saving surgery, but it could change somebody's life entirely.
Right. Well, that also is a way of saving life, right? When you transform the life, and I'm glad you chose to be on our platform to, and I'm sure we hope more and more people listen to these stories. Tell us about the global scenario, because I believe hand transplants started way back in the US. I believe in the mid 90s or something.
Yes, late 90s.
Late 90s. So globally, vis-a-vis India, where are we in terms of the transplant process, awareness? So and also another important aspect is the funds required for this, the cost.
So transplants began, or the successful transplant that was done was in 1998 in the US. And there were multiple centers in the US and the Europe which were performing hand transplants. It was practically not feasible at that point of time to do such surgeries in India. As again, I would say that it is not a life-saving surgery. So naturally, every country had their own priorities to begin with, and as the things get established, then you begin to focus on quality of life issues. So transplant programs were mainly in the West to begin with, but today India is way ahead of the West in all these programs. So like
It's interesting.
the absolute number of transplants in India is higher than any other country in the world.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Is it the cost?
It is both probably. One is the need. The potential amputees who need it, the ability to perform the surgery or the technical expertise, the medical support or the multidisciplinary care or the quality of infrastructure, the overall cost of treatment. The cost of treatment in India is more than 10 to 12 times lesser as compared to the US and the Europe.
I think that's how the whole concept of medical tourism thrived in India, right? I mean, it's just the cost itself.
That is what makes these programs more affordable and more sustainable in the long run.
But you also mentioned about technically we are more superior, as you said. So are we saying that in terms of the whole process, is it a lot more seamless in India vis-a-vis the West?
So a transplant, I believe, is not just a medical problem. It is also a social event.
Hmm.
So it has a lot of players in it. It has the patient himself, his I mean the mental and the psychological makeup. Always I come up to this thing that is one of the most important factor.
Hmm.
The Indian family structure, the Indian family support, the emotional makeup of an individual, his ability to fall back on his family,
Hmm.
and the support that they provide in the time of need.
Hmm.
Plus the overall the infrastructural development or the technical expertise, and and the cost finally. So money, I believe, is one of the least important factors in any transplant,
Why do you say that?
because it is again the same thing. The patient who has to go through it, who has to go through the process, who has to go through the process of taking lifelong immunosuppression,
Hmm.
facing the difficulties and challenges associated with it,
Hmm.
be brave enough to undergo rigorous rehabilitation, and to get a functional hand.
So you're saying from that perspective, from that context,
Yes.
but are there resources available for people can raise funds? Are there support from the government? Are hospitals working towards it?
Yes, currently there are not many programs supporting the transplant, but yes, we have used the social media or the crowdfunding platforms quite effectively
Hmm.
in order to help these patients, because practically each of them has been from a working class. Normally,
Ah,
it is
the
the
social.
working
Okay.
it is the working person who loses his hands,
Hmm.
and so finances is always a constraint.
Correct.
And we have used the social platforms to some extent, and with the help of some entrepreneurs or NGOs, we have been able to raise funds for these patients,
Hmm.
in order to rehabilitate them.
So, if I may ask, how many transplants have you been personally a part of? Where?
We have done 9 transplants in 9 individuals.
Hmm.
So 8 of our transplants have been bilateral.
Okay.
One of these has been unilateral.
Okay.
So it's for one hand,
So-
and that was again a very special case, which is not done probably anywhere else in the world.
Huh.
It was for a congenital absence for the hand.
Okay.
A hand which
You'll
is,
have to explain that a little more, Doc.
so many a times people lose hands after accidents,
Hmm.
but this girl, she did not have the hand since birth.
Ah,
So it's a birth defect.
correct.
And then performing a transplant in a congenital absence is probably even more challenging, because not many people thought it would work.
Correct, because the body never actually had
Yes,
the hands. Yeah.
it's a new thing for the brain
Right.
to cope up with.
Cope up with.
The
Correct.
brain may not accept, because it is used to a certain way of life
Hmm.
all these years, and then accepting a new hand and making it work
Hmm.
could really be pose some special challenges. But again, this girl was extremely motivated and focused, and she was keen that she needs to feel complete. She needs to not attract any curious looks, which she had been suffering since her childhood.
Hmm.
And it had a huge impact. She was a loner. She would be at home. She would not go out and mix with her friends,
Hmm.
because probably she would be teased by people.
Hmm.
So a lot of mental and psychological issues, which was ultimately also having an impact on her academic growth. So she was very much clear and motivated that she needs to have both normal hands. And she was our first patient who underwent transplant for a birth defect. So that was another special case.
That is such an inspiring story, Doc, medically as well as a personal story. So, coming to personal stories, let's get to your story, Doc. You are a hand transplant surgeon. You are head of the department in Global Hospital. I believe you also have an OPD in Vadia Hospital for pediatrics.
Yes.
And hand transplant surgery This is a unit of cosmetic surgery or plastic surgery, if my understanding is correct.
Yes. So broadly, plastic surgery actually is a very wide specialty. So I basically trained as a plastic surgeon, and then with my interest in hand surgery and reconstruction and microsurgery, I did a couple of fellowships in brachial plexus and peripheral nerve surgery, and I'm now into hardcore hand and reconstructive surgery. And transplant again is a part of the same. It is a subspecialty of the same. Cosmetic surgery is an essential part of plastic surgery, but that is an entirely different zone.
But
Yes.
you were a part of the cost. It started off with cosmetic surgery, right?
Plastic surgery is the broader term. Cosmetic surgery is a part of plastic surgery,
And okay.
just as hand surgery is.
We spoke about the hand transplant surgery, the processes. If my understanding is correct, it's pretty much a 14 to 15-hour surgery process.
Yes.
Or more?
Yeah, so it could, depending on the level of the transplant or the number of structures. You see, the hand is a complex anatomy. So there are too many structures which need to be aligned and repaired. So it could range anywhere from 12 hours to 16 hours or 18 hours at time. So,
And what kind of a team are we talking about? I mean, I'm sure it must be a large team working.
Yes, it is a large team, and we have to take turns because it is each step is intense and it is important, and it is likely to have an impact on the final outcome. So we have 10 to 15 plastic and microvascular surgeons who come in for the surgery.
10 to
15.
15.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
In addition to the orthopedic surgeons who will do the fixation of the bones, plus there will be 4 to 5 anesthesiologists who will monitor and take care of the patient. There will be an immunology team who will be taking care of the immunosuppression, which begins right before the surgery. And then post surgery, the patient is in the intensive care, and there is a whole team of ICU doctors and nurses who take care of the patient. And then the help and support of every little individual matters, being the OT staff or a supportive staff or the cleaning staff, right from the lift man who helps in quick passage of the organ which is being transported. So right from the airport authorities who help in getting us the green corridor done, the police officials who let the ambulance negotiate the traffic and reach the hospital in time. So it is every little individual, and it is a huge teamwork which ultimately results in the successful outcome. And I'm just the representative of all of them.
That's really modest of you, Doc. So from the time you receive the alert and for the organ to come in and the entire surgery process. So how much of it do you, of course, there is technological advancements. Are you a man of faith, Doc?
Yes, very much.
And does that help you in your, I'm sure, in the way you go about your life? Absolutely. In your job, how much of it is the faith which the patients put on you, your personal faith?
Yes, it is all faith, I believe. It is faith in everything, the trust and the faith of the patient in us that pushes us to do our best to make sure that everything goes safe and sound and they get a good outcome. The faith that the Almighty has put us in this unique situation in order to do something special for these individuals who otherwise have lost hopes in their lives. So it is faith at every step.
Absolutely.
I believe it is. I'm grateful about everything I've achieved in my life.
Doc, I while researching for this interview also studied, and you are more than just a surgeon. There are other interests: music, art, literature. If you could share a little bit about what you do outside of your work, how do you keep yourself sane, if I may say?
Yeah, I often discuss it with my wife that 24 hours are too short for a day. I wish a day had the 36 or 48 hours to do justice to whatever we want to do.
It's the same story everywhere, Doc. Yeah.
So I like running. I like yoga. I like music. I like photography. I like trekking. A lot of things: art, cinema, music. So and I'm try to devote some part of my time to all these activities throughout the week. So it's really a very busy week. I do yoga 2 or 3 times a week. I do run marathons. Uh,
Oh,
I
it's
I
interesting.
I do trekking. One Himalayan trek a year is an must,
That
or it
is
is an
fantastic, Doc.
essentiality. So my son is a wildlife enthusiast. So a safari has also become a part of our annual trips. So wildlife photography also is another passion that is added to my.
So are we saying Himalayan trek, marathon, safari, yoga, and the works?
Yes,
And that's how you keep yourself sane.
yes, absolutely.
Doc, this has been an amazing time with you. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope this, in our own way, we're able to spread the awareness of what a hand transplant surgery is and why it's needed. And I understand you've repeated it multiple times that it's not life saving, but it's truly life transformational, if I would say. I'm sure the stories you shared of your patients, those stories will reach out to as many people as possible. And this is kind of a movement, and I really congratulate you on this journey. And I hope you're able to fulfill your personal dream and dreams of people who really want to pursue their goals and ambitions. Thank you so much for your time. And I really look forward to more interactions and more conversations with you outside of the podcast, and maybe a future episode again on this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here. And as you rightly said, it is a movement, and we need more and more hands joining together in order to reach out to
Sure.
every individual in the country, in the world, and to make a difference to their lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. And thank you, everyone, for listening in. I hope this was truly an intriguing, interesting experience, just as it has been for me personally. Until next time, thank you for your time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Between Us podcast. This podcast was recorded at manicpod Studios in Chembur, Mumbai. Our sound engineer is Mainak Chakraborty, and your producers are Arnav Dogra and Santosh Kumar. The Between Us podcast uploads episodes weekly, and we'll see you next time.